Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I am Mark Givler, joined by Kevin Noon today. Kind of an interesting point in the recruiting calendar. We're down to the last, 6 weeks or so of the 2024 recruiting cycle. We're seeing some 2025 activity. We're starting to see the foundation being laid for 2026 and maybe some priority targets emerging there. And so we've got some action in 2025 to talk about, and we've got some visitor stuff to talk about. It's going to be a pretty big visitor weekend coming up, but it's going to look a little bit different than I think what people expected a few days ago. And we'll get into that and kind of give a status update on where things are at there with a few different situations. But we will also have a full update on BuckeyeHuddle.com. We're not going to hit on everything in this podcast today, so head on over there. We'll have some written stuff up there over the next 24 hours in regards to the visit weekend. First of all, though, Kevin, big news this week, and we've kind of talked about this on the podcast a few times recently, so it was nice foreshadowing, I guess. The very last time we recorded, we talked about Devin Sanchez and said, don't think anything's coming immediately, but also don't think this is going to be one of those that drags all the way through the 2025 cycle. Could see this actually ending this winter or spring. Sure enough, Devin Sanchez has announced a decision date of January 6th at the All-American Bowl in San Antonio, where I will be that week. Part of the wave of kind of the new wave of All-American Bowl announcements where not as many seniors are announcing at these things as there used to be. So they've kind of moved things to, they'll have a few seniors announced who are signing late or maybe who aren't signing late, but just going to keep things quiet. But some 2025s now are announcing commitments at these things. We saw it last year with some guys, with some juniors announcing. So that's kind of the new trend. Kevin, are the Buckeyes going to get good news on January 6th?
I mean, it certainly seems to be trending that way. You don't come out and announce a decision date generally and be like, but I have no idea what I'm going to do. I mean, obviously, with the backdrop of a big all-star game, maybe that's a little bit different, but I have a feeling that Devin Sanchez has a really good idea of where it is that he wants to go. And the timing matches up pretty well with everything that he's done in regards to Ohio State. Now, the other finalists certainly are no slouches. This isn't a case of him saying, I'm choosing between Ohio State, ITT Tech, and DeVry. Everybody that's on that little final list of his is pretty darn special in terms of football. But I do like Ohio State's chances here. I think that this is one of these January type of commitments that if it is made in favor of Ohio State has a really good shot of holding on to. This isn't one of these out of left field, nobody knew that it was coming type of decisions. So, yeah, I guess right now here in the second week of November, I feel pretty confident in saying that I think this one will trend correctly for the good guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's about 2 months left for something to change, someone to get it in his head, either bump him off a decision entirely or change the math on what he's thinking. But it certainly looks very good right now for Ohio State. I've had him projected into the class for a little bit now, and I feel very good about the timing of all of this. Coming off the Ohio State visit, he sets the date, has proclaimed Ohio State the leader. There's not going to be a ton of time for anyone to change that between now and January as far as visits. There's only so many weekends left that a kid could even be on campus at this point. And I know he's kind of wrapped up in playoffs right now too. So this looks very, very good for Ohio State to get what would be a huge commitment. The biggest commitment they've got from an out-of-state prospect, I think, in a few years anyway. I mean, this is like a top 10. I mean, other than maybe Jeremiah Smith, because he committed 2 years ago or a year and a half ago now or whatever it's been. It probably goes back to Jeremiah. So it's been a little bit since, I think, in my opinion, since they've landed an out-of-state commitment of this caliber. I think Sanchez is very likely the #1 corner in the country. Reminds me a lot of Jeff Okudah. And if anyone has followed me over the years, they know how much I liked Jeff Okudah in high school. So this would be a huge early commitment for Ohio State. And like I said, I think they're going to get it. You have to like the trajectory right now for that secondary. Tim Walton, Perry Eliano, they're getting really good players in the fold, but just their development so far, what we've seen from the secondary is kind of night and day this year to what we've kind of had been seeing the last few years. They're developing young guys, Jermaine Matthews, Malik Hartford. This feels like the culmination of all of that work.
Yeah, I would just say another name just here in the most recent cycle, and it could be debatable there. Justin Scott out of Illinois. Granted, Illinois, I think, is an extension of Ohio State's normal recruiting area. I think you could sit there and put a couple of states in there for that. But yeah, we talked through the years that as Ohio State's defense kind of got away from them, that maybe there was a little bit of a wait and see. We need to see if Jim Knowles is the guy. We need to see if all these things you're talking about are going to become a reality. Well, lo and behold, 9 games through the season, a lot of these defensive things have become a reality, and I think we're starting to see Ohio State's defensive recruiting efforts pay off. Now they just have to figure out how to parlay that into offensive line recruiting, but maybe we talk about that later. Maybe that's another show. But the Devin Sanchez pickup, really is a big reintroduction into recruiting the top kids out of the state of Texas, which has certainly become maybe even a little bit more competitive as Texas has awoken a little bit in terms of its recruiting and its on-field success. So it's not as easy for Ohio State to go in. And, a lot of these kids we talk about, Baron Browning, Jeff Okudah, this was all pre-NIL. It is a very different landscape now. And for Ohio State to be able to go in there and get somebody, and that just if he commits January 6th, you're still going to have to hold on to him until whatever it is, the second week of December. But, I think it is a big statement. And I think that you're going to see other players maybe on their own timetables follow in kind.
And look, we'll do the whole reaction thing on January 6th if it happens, but pairing him with Blake Woodby right off the bat is just an incredible start. I mean, these are, Sanchez probably is a 5-star, is arguably the top corner in the country. Woodby's a top 100 guy. Ironically, they're both out of schools that Ohio State's had some struggles with over the years, had some early, maybe positive vibes from kids at these places over the years, and it just never came to fruition. Places at St. Francis Academy in Baltimore for Woodby, and in North Shore outside of Houston there for Devin Sanchez. So this is also getting the foot in the door at 2 of the most talent-rich programs in the country. So there's a lot to like about this situation if this goes the way I think it's going to go for Ohio State. Big visitor weekend. There's a couple things I want to get into on this. Like I said, I'm not going to get into everything. It'd be 3 hours. There's been some shuffling around I want to kind of break down here in the last couple of days. Most of it's on the defensive line, but there is some other stuff going on. Let's start though with the defensive line, because that is kind of, I think, everyone's big thing right now. So initially, the thought was Carlin Jones would be on campus for an official visit. The recently offered Nebraska commit defensive tackle. That Deshaun Warner, 4-star Kansas defensive end commitment, would be on campus for his official visit. And that Amaris Williams, top 100 defensive end, probably an end at this point, we'll call him a strong side end, committed to Florida, would be back on an unofficial visit. One of those things is happening. 2 of those 3 things are not happening. Let's start with what is happening. Amaris Williams, as of today, as of Thursday afternoon, is still on board with his unofficial visit, which is a tremendous sign for Ohio State and where they sit. He was just on his official a couple weeks ago. He's already coming back on an unofficial. To me, I've projected him to flip to Ohio State at some point. To me, this is further evidence that is probably going to happen. Kevin, it's before we get into some of the other dominoes here, how good does this look for Ohio State? Because again, was just up on his official a couple of weeks ago, and now he's sandwiching this unofficial in before the end of the season.
Well, one, it certainly doesn't look good for Florida. I'll say that because there are other visits that he wants to take, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Two, nothing has patently changed at Ohio State from the time of his October 21st official visit here, leading into his unofficial visit. And we'll just put it to, I guess, what, November 11th was when the game officially is against Michigan State. So if you come on campus for your official on like a fact-finding mission, getting familiar with the program, trying to learn some things under an official visit capacity, and then you're just coming back a couple weeks after on your own dime, and he's not coming from Siberia. I mean, it's not a super expensive trip, but still, it's time, it's money. There's a lot of things that go to this to make the kind of visit. And if he wants to take all these other visits and he's taking a weekend and saying, I'm going back to Ohio State, that's one less visit that he's able to take if he is intending on signing on the early signing period. So I think you have to take this as a huge positive for Ohio State and a likely indicator that, certainly I think that they're the team to beat, even if he is still committed to Florida at this point. I think Ohio State is the team to beat. So as long as he has a good visit to Ohio State, now, does that mean that we have him on commit watch and that we could be talking about him on Sunday? I don't know, maybe. Potentially. You never know the timelines that these players have. We're so close to National Signing Day, the December variety of it. But, I think it very well could happen. And certainly as Ohio State has a lot of feelers out there to bolster the ranks of its defensive line class, there's something to be said of, you're sold on me and I'm sold on you. So let's just shake hands and be done with it and make this official.
And I do think there's an element here of like Ohio State does need to know publicly, privately, whatever, but Ohio State does need to know because they can't just sign what they have right now. They've got to add to this class. They've got to add defensive linemen to this class. So I think we'll see something sooner than later. I don't think this will go to like the week of the early signing period unless he is given some type of agreement to Ohio State before then, and they're going to somehow trust that and be okay with that. I think they're going to want this. I think they're going to want this done. I think they're going to want an answer here pretty soon. So the other reason I say that is Deshaun Warner committed to Kansas. Again, this was allegedly going to be an official visit weekend for him. That's not happening. And unlike the next guy I'm going to talk about, Carlin Jones, there's no reschedule date at this point. And it wasn't put to me as there won't be a rescheduling, but it was put to me that there was not at this point, that just not yet. So could this be Amaris Williams' chance to beat Deshaun Warner to any type of commitment punch? And they've given him the opportunity to come back up and, hey, we need to know because we got this other guy that we could be bringing in next weekend.
Yeah, they call it a right of first refusal. And it's a case of, hey, we're getting to this point. We can't sit tight on the numbers that we have right now. There are certainly other players that are very interested in potentially grabbing this spot. We really like you. If you can come up and take another look, and a verbal commitment is a verbal commitment is a verbal commitment. There's only so much that you can take from it. Nothing is solidified until pen meets paper and paper goes into the fax machine. And we know that that's more of an old school version of how signing day works these days, but we still like to kind of hang on to the whole conversation about the fax machine. So yeah, if Williams comes and gets the right message, I think one of the biggest indicators, if Williams doesn't come outright and just commit on the visit or commit the day after, is if we don't see Werner stuff moving, I think you should be able to take that as a positive indication, but you never know.
And this, again, I think is going to be pretty clear pretty quick because sure. It's that weekend in December, right before the early signing period opens up. They're not going to want to drag this to then. So we're going to know, I think, very quickly, because either Deshaun Warner's going to visit next weekend or he's probably not going to visit, is kind of my stance at this point, or they're really going to be scrambling at the end trying to get him to visit. I just don't think they want it to come to that. So I think we're going to see something here pretty soon. Carlin Jones, Bay City, Texas, defensive tackle, not impacted by any of the things we just talked about. Carlin has a playoff game scheduled for Saturday this weekend, so that's obviously a no-go for him. That looks to be happening next weekend. We'll see, playoff results and if anything weird happens with that. But the notion right now is that he will be back, or he will be in Columbus next weekend when they host Minnesota. So no concerns there, just simply high school football playoff scheduling, and that's that. So, and again, he's being recruited to play 3-tech. The other guys are being recruited to play on the outside. I think they're both kind of thought of as strong side ends, both Warner and Williams, which means I still think they would take Marquise Lightfoot, but that continues. If you followed me on our site, on our board, that seems to be a Larry Johnson longevity issue for Lightfoot and his people. So I don't know how they're going to overcome that between now and December's early signing period. If they will, we'll see. But I don't think they've stopped recruiting him, and I don't think I don't think Williams flipping would shut the door for Lightfoot from Ohio State's perspective.
No, and I want to jump in really quick there. It's funny because they can sit there, and I'm sure Miami is pointing out, well, you don't know how long Larry Johnson's going to be there. Well, I think anybody from the Ohio State side, and I don't talk to them about this, should be pointing out, I don't know how long Mario Cristobal is going to be at Miami. We've seen the history of coaches at Miami. It has been a minute since they've had a coach that has had I'll just say any success, but we'll say, prolonged success. So it's one thing to be said about you want to make sure that your position coach is going to be there through your entire run. But I think that as we're seeing coaches getting 1 year in some instances, that nothing is guaranteed anymore in terms of what's going on. About the only guarantees out there are when you get to kind of the top of your profession, the Sabins, and certainly Ryan Day's success at Ohio State, some things like that. But outside of that, you just don't know. And it's real. You can say all the right things, but you can't necessarily be sure you're going to deliver.
Right. And so that's the argument, or the debate, or the whatever it's going to take place here over the next month, is geography versus stability versus, everything else. So we will see what happens there. But again, my thought is still that Ohio State's in very good shape to flip Williams. I think they're in pretty good shape to flip Jones, but that's kind of a different visit. We talked about this on the last show. This is the Jones visit is very much kind of a two-way interview. The conversations have only started the last couple of weeks. And so I think Ohio State needs to know, okay, let's get this guy on campus for a few days and just kind of get a feel for what he's about. And Carlin Jones needs to do the same thing with Ohio State. Let's get myself on campus here and see what Ohio State's all about. So that's more of a two-way interview process. But I do think the fact that he's visiting this late in the process with a commitment to Nebraska, certainly says something for Ohio State's chances. The other kind of elephant in the room, Jordan Seaton, IMG offensive tackle, for my money, one of the top couple offensive linemen in the country, not visiting this weekend. Had this official visit scheduled for a long time. Not happening. IMG has practice on Saturday. Now, how valid is it for a school who doesn't play in a postseason, their last game is next Friday, to be restricting kids' official visits over a Saturday practice? I'm not going to get into that debate today. That's kind of for everyone else to decide. It comes off a little strange to me, but we will find out one way or the other very soon again, because IMG, as I just mentioned, IMG's last game is next Friday. So, 8 days from now, Ohio State's got a game home game against Minnesota next weekend. Obviously, if this is going to happen, he's got to schedule a visit for that weekend. I don't think this will be a December thing either. I think Ohio State needs to know, are you coming next weekend or not? And so we'll know probably Monday or Tuesday if Jordan Seaton's going to show up at Ohio State next weekend. And then we can kind of reassess from there what we think Ohio State's chances are. I felt that Seaton and kind of a lot of people who are helping him guide through the process have really had an affinity for Ohio State for a while, and they have had pretty much as good of a chance as anybody. But if that visit doesn't happen, it's a zero. It's a 0% chance. They got to get him on campus next weekend.
Yeah, it's really hard to land a kid, sight unseen in a lot of regards from that. I mean, we know certainly Ohio State's kept tabs. We know we were down at IMG, and Larry Johnson during the evaluation period was one of many coaches down there to check him out, but you want to get him on campus. Recently visited Colorado, by all accounts had a really good visit, but then again, you got to be doing something incredibly wrong if players come to your campus for visits and they have terrible visits. So you've got to get them on campus. And one other thing to remember about early December, if everything goes right for Ohio State, it is preparing for a game. It is preparing to go to Indianapolis and go to the Big Ten championship game. Now, not to put the cart before the horse, there are 3 more games left to be played. There's a lot still to happen. So I'm not saying Ohio State is absolutely going to Indianapolis. And certainly you can't just sit there and turn a blind eye and say, well, we're not going to worry about recruiting that week. You can't do that. You just can't do that. I mean, that's just where sometimes schedules for high school kids end, and that's when you're going to be able to get them in. And I'm sure the cynics out there will be like, well, don't really have to prepare for anybody out of the Big Ten West. Maybe I agree with that too, to a certain extent, but I'm sure Ryan Day would shout me down if he heard me saying that. But yeah, Michigan State this week, Minnesota next week. Those are your last 2 really good opportunities prior to early signing period.
So we'll see what happens there. My stance continues to be that he'll end up at Alabama or Ohio State, and we'll see how that plays out here over the next few weeks. Moving along, there's some interesting stuff going on in 2026 this weekend that I'm very fascinated with. First of all, we'll get into one of our favorite prospects in the country in that class, a guy I've seen quite a bit of already. Malachi Toney, super speedster, Tyreek Hill 2.0, big time playmaker out of American Heritage, 2026 receiver, committed early to Miami. Wore Ohio State stuff on it, headbands, helmet stickers, everything. All freshman year, commits to Miami. Everyone's upset. I once again had to come in and say, you didn't want to get this commitment 3 years before signing day. Relax. Lots of time to go here. Malachi Toney on campus this weekend. Look, Brandon Inniss having a great time in Columbus. Byron Lewis, 2025 running back. Just had a great visit to Ohio State a few weeks ago. I said I've had that one Ohio State slight edge over Miami probably since last spring. Now you're getting Toney back on campus. I wouldn't want to see him. I don't know that I'd want to see him flip this weekend. Let's not get too far down the road on this, but the idea that he's already taken another visit to Ohio State, great news for the Buckeyes. He's got a good relationship with Heartline. This is encouraging and just kind of further evidence that you don't worry about the South Florida kid committing 3 years before signing day.
Just to show you how early it is and maybe just how unconcerned I am about the Miami commitment. I didn't remember he was a Miami commitment until about 20 seconds before I got to start speaking here. That is how little that I had even processed that. I would much rather be in a position of where I'm playing offense than defense. I mean, at some point you're going to have, if he wants to commit, you have to take the commitment, whether it's 12 months out, 6 months out, you get to like 18 months out. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot at that point. I can sit there and talk about somebody like Jonte Gilbert, who committed to Ohio State out of the blue. And then it was just, we were on a countdown to when he was going to decommit, which he ultimately did. Have him keep visiting Ohio State. Next year becomes the year of Tate and Ennis and guys like that. It certainly wouldn't hurt to see some other South Florida Express guys start to pop out there as well. Might still be a little bit early for somebody like Cedric Hawkins, but you go from there. I think that Ohio State is very much in this one. And to go back to just an old saying, no, he hasn't necessarily committed to Miami. We just know that Miami leads right now at this point. And I could even make the argument that Miami maybe doesn't even lead. It was just easier to commit home and do that and then just kind of focus on what he wants to. But Ohio State has done a great job at American Heritage. Obviously, Ohio State has done a great job with players with ties to South Florida Express. Game on.
Yep, no question. We told everyone not to panic back in August when he committed, and just Heartline's going to keep at it, and you see what happens. But I think Ohio State still very much alive and very much a possible destination for Tony. Last thing I do want to throw out there, 2026 quarterback recruiting, because that's the next class Ohio State's got to land a quarterback in. They've got their 24 guy. They've got their 25 guy. And 26 is getting interesting. They've got 2 big-time targets that we've already confirmed for this weekend. First one we'll talk about is Jared Curtis, who is pretty much the consensus number 2 quarterback in the country in 2026, behind Julian Lewis, who may reclassify to 2025 even. So it is possible when the dust settles that Jared Curtis could be the top quarterback in 2026. He is from Nashville Christian in Tennessee, and he has an early top 10. Ohio State's on it, but he's coming up. So that is going to be a prime target of Ryan Day and Corey Dennis, as they have all this time now with the early commitment of Tavian St. Clair to really zero in on their 2026 guys. Again, top 10, like Tennessee's going to be in there. Georgia's going to be in there. If Julian Lewis reclassifies to 2025, which I expect, you could even see like USC get in there. Alabama's going to be in there. This is going to be a slugfest, but you've made an early impression on this kid just by your quarterback lineage the last decade or so. He's got you in the top 10. He's coming up to visit. In the watch what they do type of things, he's taking the proper steps that would lead you to believe that he's a viable target for Ohio State.
Absolutely. 6'3", 210 listed right now. And for a kid that's still so young as a class of 2026, you don't know necessarily where he's going to be playing at the, in terms of height, weight at the college level, but, a great kid there. I mean, and I think something too is that you look at Ohio State, and obviously, Aaron Noland is coming in the class of 24. Tavian St. Clair is coming in the class of 2025. You look at Ohio State's quarterback legacy. Look at what C.J. Stroud is doing right now. I mean, in terms of he's probably the de facto NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, just based on some of the numbers that he's had. I don't know if you necessarily see at Ohio State we always want to sit there and connect the dots. It's like, so-and-so is going to hand it to so-and-so is going to hand it to so-and-so. I think that things could be pretty wide open for Ohio State at quarterback, and I think that's going to be important. I think watching what Ohio State is doing with the education and progression of Kyle McCord is important. Ohio State brought in 3 generational quarterbacks with the late Dwayne Haskins and with Justin Fields through the transfer portal there, and then obviously with C.J. Stroud. Somebody who maybe has been somebody that you've had to be a little bit more hands-on with. I think that's all going to be important too. But, the good news is by the time we're talking about 26 quarterbacks, anybody that we're really seeing play today is not necessarily going to be in the equation. So not having to sit there and have a lot of hands-on, making sure you're massaging your 24 quarterback and you're massaging your 25 quarterback. Corey Dennis, Ryan Day can put all of their focus in what 26 is going to be.
Yep. And so we'll see how that goes. I think that's going to be a very interesting component to this weekend, is what Jared Curtis is saying. I think it's probably too early to sit here and be like, well, he's their top target, but clearly he's the highest ranked target they have right now at quarterback. That doesn't necessarily mean he's like pulled away from everyone else on their board. They're still evaluating guys. I'm sure that process will go on at least through this summer, if not into the fall, next fall. But this is a guy who, again, is pretty much consensus that he's the number 2 quarterback in the class in the country. So that's going to be obviously a 5-star quarterback, a very highly rated guy. So I think this could set the tone, I think, for kind of the direction of quarterback recruiting. How does Ohio State feel coming out of this visit? How does Jared Curtis feel about Ohio State coming out of this visit? Will be something to watch. But there's another one, Will Griffin, a guy Kevin and I saw this summer at camp at Ohio State, who we really liked. Huge arm, built almost like a linebacker, just a strong kid. Tampa Jesuit, another great program down there in Florida. He's coming back up. Again, we got to talk to his people. This was we got some insight over the summer that this was a school that Will is really high on. This is, things change during the recruiting process, but pretty much every kid in the country that gets recruited at this type of level has those 2 or 3 schools when he starts the process that he hopes things click with, because he would ideally like to go to like one of those 2 or 3 schools. And that's one of them for Will Griffin, from what we were told over the summer. He's backing that up. He camps over the summer. He comes back here this weekend, scheduled to make an unofficial visit. Look, let's see what happens with Jared Curtis too, but this would be an excellent guy. If this ended up being their guy in 26, it'd be an excellent pickup.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the thing with Will Griffin is that he came up to the camp, and we didn't necessarily, you hear names of who you're expecting to see. And I certainly didn't know who he was beforehand. And it was a all hands on deck. Who the heck is this kid? We've got to figure out who he is. I mean, throws a great ball. I mean, on that day, and he was in a grouping with Tavian St. Clair and with Ryan Montgomery. And I could make a very, very valid argument that on that day, Griffin had the best day in terms of throwing the ball. And, I think that getting involved with him and getting him on campus, getting that familiarity, all of that is very important, because he's going to be another national recruit. I mean, obviously being from Florida, he's going to get all the Southeast love, but QB whisperer Lincoln Riley is going to try and get his hooks into him. I mean, Texas is going to everybody's going to get involved with him. So the fact that he's already making these trips right now, really for sorry, Sparty, a nothing game for, Michigan State, but it is an easy game to travel to in terms of being a Saturday night game. That's why you're seeing a lot of kids descend on Columbus for that game. It's probably not, it's 31-point line, so it's not necessarily going to be the most competitive game in theory. I think it's a big deal. And there are just a lot of QB names that I'm very excited about for 2026, and Griffin's right there.
So we'll have more on BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'll have a full visit preview up like I did last time for the Penn State games. Some big storylines to watch, maybe a couple of predictions here and there. We'll continue to update lists as players are added or subtracted. This will continue to be a fluid thing really up until the game on Saturday. But appreciate everyone watching, listening. Catch us on BuckeyeHuddle.com if you're not already. A great time to sign up with the Michigan game coming up. Look, we've got a Michigan thread right now focused on that whole situation that's got like, I don't even know what are we up to, like 250 pages?
We're on page 250, and unfortunately our number of replies rounds out. So it's been at 5K for a while, and views
we're closing in on 6K, right? Probably.
And views are up over 183,000. So it has been appointment viewing, and I know I probably have a decent amount of lost productivity because of that thread, because I've spent so much time there.
It's your one-stop shop for everything. All the articles that get posted, all the Twitter rumors, all the message board rumors. We're all talking about it there. Again, great time to sign up at BuckeyeHuddle.com if you're not already, to get all that juicy stuff. And then the stretch run here is Ohio State chases another playoff berth, potential showdown with Michigan. It could be undefeated showdown. Big Ten championship on the line, everything, all that other stuff. Early signing day in a few weeks. So check us out there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But if not, appreciate you watching and listening on here, and we will talk to you soon.